This is the Unshadowed Thought Podcast with James Hall. This podcast is dedicated to Michelle Goyevich, Ed White, Caitlin Treacle, and I Chan, and also all the others that have lost their life as a direct result of psychiatric harms.
Okay, so this podcast is on fasting. And I'm in the middle of I'm not in the middle of a fast, but I'm on day 4 of a fast right now. I'm shooting for 30 to 40 days, doing a prolonged fast. I realize now I should probably introduce the subject to people that want to listen before I release a daily journal, audio journal on fasting. So So fasting, there's all kinds of information out there. I really encourage you to look it up. Um, there's just tons. Like if you start looking at it, there's a tons of information on intermittent fasting, all these short-term fasts, and then there's a large body of just medical information on prolonged fasts as well. And there's even more information historically and otherwise about prolonged fasts. A while ago, I started to notice a few details, and fasting started to stick out in my mind. A friend of mine was in an acute state of benzo withdrawal, and they fasted for a while, and they had been in this state for quite a few months. Was not good. Wasn't good. Admittedly, I thought it was going to end badly. And then they fasted, and then a little while later, they came out of the withdrawal state and they were relatively okay. They could return back to doing a fair amount of functioning, not perfect, but much better just after a few days of fasting. And while there was a delay between the improvement and the fast, it stuck out in my mind. Someone that I know just reached out and said that someone they were working with was in an acute akathisia state. They fasted for, I think, 3 days because naturally they didn't want to eat, and then that brought them out of the akathisia. Let's see. Aside from that, another person that I've been working with said, this was a little while back, a few months ago, came to me and said, they had tried some of these diet regimes or diet. I look at it as just a way to eat, but I had been on a really natural, holistic diet for a while, and I always encourage them to try it as well, the Candida diet. But it's really difficult, and you go through a lot of detox and other nastiness along the way. And they had tried that. They couldn't really manage it, but they had done single day fasts a few times, and they always felt better after, right? So there was this evidence. There's a ton of historical evidence. Biblically, there's a precedent for fasting. In Eastern religion and cultures, there's a huge precedent for fasting. And this is all like ancient knowledge that was passed down really in spiritual rectification and rectification of your body, or purification of your body, is what it's always been said for doing. In India, there's a huge tradition of fasting. It's all over, really. And yet, us being from the West, if you're from the West, it's not talked about, it's not promoted, it's looked at as kind of like heretical. And medical science certainly doesn't promote it widely. But that's funny, isn't it? Because the US is the most medicated society. There's all these, we know we have these really bad practices and ideas about medicine and human health because of, look at the results around you, right? A lot of us are very, very unhealthy. So there's a problem, right? And fasting is one of the things we're not talking about, at least prolonged fasts. And now we're starting to hear ideas about keto diet and intermittent fasting being hugely beneficial. So with all these things swirling around in my mind, along with a bunch of other stuff I can't even remember right now, another primary driver for me was that several times after my injury, I've been inclined and my body has been sending me signals not to eat. And I always thought that was like, oh, you're close to death, so you don't want to eat. That's natural. If you don't want to live, then you're not going to want to eat either. However, lately I've been getting that feeling, and I started to think about it a little differently. I started to think, what if my body's telling me that in order for me to heal, I need to stop eating? For a while now, actually since my TMS injury, I've had severe reactions to food. So if I eat a bunch of heavy stuff that has no sugar in it, I had developed extreme fatigue and brain fog, usually for 2 or 3 days before I come out of it. If I eat stuff that has sugar content, before I would be really anxious. Then I developed interacthasia. So, a little while back, I had half a milkshake and I had interacthasia severe, where I could barely function I had it for a week, but 3-4 days of it was I couldn't function. And then it took a few days to kind of like burn off, but I could still feel it really strong sense. So the way my body's handling food is not good. And then so I started looking into the fasting bit. And the first thing I did, I fasted for up to 5 days before in the past, and kind of the distant past. Actually, a couple of years ago, I did a 5-day fast, and I stopped and I ended it, not because I felt like I should, but because my family was like, it's been 5 days. That's long enough. This is dangerous. You can't just keep going indefinitely on a fast, and I just hadn't researched the issue very well. I just learned a little bit from my dad, and I knew it was a good, healthy thing to just kind of clean your body out every once in a while, but I really didn't know any logistics about it, no real information. So I just ended it. And I had done maybe a 3 or 4 day fast 1 or 2 times earlier in my life when I was maybe in my 20s or something. So anyway, so I was just learning about fasting again. And then, sure enough, I did a single day fast. I was like, I'm just going to fast for 1 day to see how my body reacts. Like I was really concerned that because of my TMS injury, my nervous system would go wild, and I would, have maybe crazy spasms, or I would pass out because I already have postural orthostatic intolerance. So when I kneel down or I go into a position and I move quickly afterwards, I have never actually passed out, but like everything will go black and I'll be right on the edge of passing out. So some of these things I was worried might get exacerbated by it, but I did a single day fast, and then sure enough, I was fine through the single day fast. The next day I would eat foods, right? I'd eat healthy stuff and I'd feel pretty good. I mean, my emotions would be more balanced. I wouldn't be prone to the panic or anxiety that I had. And so I did that once, I think, and I felt good. But the most impressive thing was that I felt like my digestion was actually working appropriately. And then I ate what I was eating for a few days, and then I got back to this kind of state where it didn't feel like it was working right, or I'd have these reactions again. Again, if I ate a little bit too much, I'd have extreme fatigue. If I had anything with sugar in it, I'd start to get really, really ramped up and anxious. And I knew if I had it, and I'm talking about like 20 grams in a day. I'm on a really, really, really low like I eat virtually no sugar. So if I have something, say like 10 grams at one meal and then like another 10, 15 grams at another, I'd start to get extremely anxious. And I know for a fact, if I had like 30, 40, 50 grams in a day or at one sitting, I'd have interacthasia, and that wouldn't stop for days. So I've kind of found these boundaries. Well, so the first time I fasted, I just ate normal afterwards, which is really healthy to any person on a standard American diet. But so after that, I got curious. I felt like my digestion worked really, really well after the fast, which makes sense because you're really, really hungry, and all this food starts to taste better to you and all this stuff. And you really have this dynamic change in how you perceive food and your appreciation for it. So the next time I fast, I did like 3 or 4, I think I did 3 single day fasts. So the next time I was like, I wonder if I eat something that I shouldn't eat, if my body will react badly to it. So, I mean, I don't eat gluten either. But I know like sourdough has a really low amount of gluten in it. And I love sourdough. So I was like, I'm going to try to eat sourdough and see if I have a bad reaction. So I fast for a day, I break it, I eat some healthy stuff. Then I have I think I had a turkey sandwich or something with like avocado, turkey, some sourdough. Had no reaction to it. Didn't react badly at all. In fact, I felt great afterwards. I actually felt better than normal afterwards. And then I didn't stuff myself. I just ate, what I predetermined that I wanted to eat, what I thought was a decent amount. I had like half a sandwich. I felt great after. So then I tried some sugar. I had some sugar, just enough that would probably amp me up a little bit. I mean, I'm talking about like 10 grams or something that I knew I would be able to feel, but it wasn't so much that I would get myself into trouble if it didn't go the way I thought. Felt fine after the sugar. Yeah. And then I fasted again. I kind of experimented in the same way without overdoing it. It's had the same results. So at this point, I mean, this is a couple weeks ago that I was doing this, because I had already thought that a prolonged fast could have a significant improvement to the neurological agitation that I've experienced since TMS. And I read a ton of literature about it, ton of stories, all based on, I mean, the TMS injury, neurological injury, mimics like autoimmune and other conditions that are chronic and hard to treat. And all these conditions seem to respond to prolonged fasts, at least in some literature or in some experiences. Does it help everybody? I don't know. But there's a large body of people that have given their experience of healing from a prolonged fast from these diseases, disorders, harms. So I know it's significant. There's studies that show prolonged fasting for mental illness, air quotes around that. Like the recovery rates, like 90%, 87%, 80%, huge. So because I deal with like these physiological manifestations of mental discomfort is what I'm going to say, meaning like extreme anxiety, panic attacks, severe depression. It's all physiological. Like it's my body experiencing extreme fatigue. It's my nervous system being extremely agitated. That's the anxiety. People call it anxiety, but it's nervous system agitation. Right. It can be emotional, can be strictly based on emotional. I think that's what people are calling mental illness. But yeah, your emotions provoke physiological reactions, as they should, right? If we lift our hand with our brain, right, we're like, oh, you're doing a physiological motion that's controlled by your thoughts, right? But then if our nervous system becomes extremely agitated because we're ruminating on negative thoughts and they're stressful thoughts, and we start having physical reactions to those thoughts, oh, but that's mental illness. Give me a break. I'm not buying that one. I think there's a tremendous amount of understanding that we can come to as a society generally about what we're calling mental illness, because I don't believe in mental illness anymore. There was a time when I did, and I'll never forget. Phil Hickey helped me out with this. Actually, he said when I first started communicating to him, because he had written some pieces in Mad in America about TMS, and I needed to understand what he had learned about it. And I reached out to him, and he responded very quickly. Fantastic person. He says, I just want you to know that I think psychiatry is a hoax. And when he said that, my wheels were already starting to turn about the problems with psychiatry, but that added a layer to it and got my wheels moving quicker. that this really well-rationed, grounded, kind person thought psychiatry was entirely fake and made up. And then it provoked me to question so many more things. And I ended up questioning the entire idea of mental illness, not based on what other people were telling me, but rather my own critical thinking on the matter and what I came up with based on my own experience, which is extremely important to me, but the experience of many, many others, and then what we can observe through psychiatry and the DSM and things. But mental illness really, to me, is just an aggregate of unpleasant things happening to us and then physiological manifestations, right? No one can have a diseased brain that causes them to, develop what is mental illness. It's a metaphysical disease that allows people to classify us as crazy. It's not that, that's not what it is. It's it's the consequence of physiological, changes or mysteries in our body that manifest with mental discomfort. And those expressions really trouble other people, and they want to classify that as mental illness. But I argue that classification is extremely destructive and disruptive to how we treat each other and handle each other and perceive each other as human beings. I won't digress on that anymore. This is about the fast and fasting. So that's where I landed with that's all the evidence. I mean, there's a ton more, and there's 2 books that I read on it as well. I'll grab the names and I'll throw them in here that I got through a water only fasting group that I joined in Facebook, because I wanted to get some really good materials to read up on to be sure about this. Because when we look at the ancients or historically fasting, we're talking 30 to 40 days. This isn't, when I first thought that I would fast for a prolonged period, I thought, before I had read the literature and had learned a lot, I said, well, I'd like to fast for 40 days, like historically so many people have. And I thought, that's impossible. I thought that is not possible. The only reason those people were able to do it is because they had overcome some physical elements of the world, and they were so spiritual that they could calm their body through the process and make it through. And it was more of a spiritual progression rather than a physical progression. And I literally thought that was impossible. I still think it's impossible. But when I thought about overcoming this TMS harm that I've had for 5 years almost, I thought the only way I can overcome it in a really, really significant way, or like completely and totally in a short period of time, is going to be by doing something that's impossible. And when I thought about the fast, I thought, this is impossible. If I can do something impossible, maybe that will give me the hope and the courage to believe that I can really beat this thing, because dealing with it on a daily basis is really hard to believe that you can beat it and have hope a lot of the time. And lately, having hope has been a hard commodity when you hit 5 years of dealing with this crap. Hope, I realized when I went into the 4th year that my hope was starting to dwindle because it had been so long. And I was like, if you go 5 years without the progress, like significant progress, then you're done. Like, this is just the rest of your life. It's over. And that's short-sighted, and it's not the most helpful or reasonable thing to think. I mean, you can continue to recover for a long time, and one day be really great. 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, you still have a tremendous amount of life to live. But I certainly haven't been thinking that way lately. So this is where I ended up. It's like, I was really motivated to endeavor to do something impossible to overcome my injury. And my thought was that even if I don't overcome my injury physically, then mentally I will have won a huge battle to overcome my injury. And I honestly believe that regardless of how severe physical injuries can be, that looking back through history and other people, like mentally, if you overcome the injury, it will overcome it physically as well. And even if you suffer, or even if you experience the pain of your injury still, if mentally you're not suffering from your injury, then you've overcome it. And so that was another big motivation for looking at fasting. And the more I read about fasting, the more it seemed impossible to me to go so long. But the more motivated I became because I wanted to do something impossible. And so here I am. So I'm sharing this with everybody. And there's a lot of promising things about fasting generally, but also prolonged fasts. And I'll put some books up in the link to this podcast, but there'll be a lot of information I'll probably discuss as I go through my daily journal on it as well, that I'm kind of forgetting now because it's kind of impromptu. I didn't really plan on doing a really thorough and long podcast on fasting and what it is. I was also thinking about when it's done, however long I make it. The other thing is, when you need to break a fast, you have to break a fast. If you're having, certain problems that creep up, like you're having extreme fatigue and exhaustion, it's an indication that your body's going through starvation, which is different than fasting. Fasting is going through your reserves that your body naturally stores for itself. And there's all these kind of biological changes that happen as well, all the way down to the cellular level. But at first you detox in a fast, and then after there's this detox process, there's these changes going through your digestion stops, you stop producing digestive enzymes, and then there's this free bandwidth for your nervous system, and it actually goes and starts improving your body at a cellular level. Your mitochondria changes, and all this stuff changes. Then those are the real healing properties of the fast, which seems to be around 7 to 10 days. And when you get beyond that, and you get into this different state of the fast, you lose your hunger. You're not hungry anymore. And then you stop detoxing, and these other changes start happening. So that's where I'm aiming to get to. But I'm not going to go into a tremendous detail. There's a lot of resources out there. I was thinking about maybe interviewing other people that have completed 30 or 40-day fasts after I go through this fasting process. I was in a kind of a hurry to do it because I really wanted to improve my situation. And even though it would be difficult, I was very excited to do it once I read a tremendous amount of evidence and seen other people's stories. It's totally inspiring and nuts. Like, I just can't believe the stories that are coming out of this stuff. It's life changing. It changes the way you perceive life and you think about things. And based on my experience with some fasts in the past, even short ones, like, I believe that it's possible based on the information that I've gotten from my friends and other people that I've been acquaintances, been relatively close to, that just have given me some anecdotal information. It really seems like a positive thing. The funny thing is, I've never heard a single person say anything negative about a fast or that they experience harm from a fast. In the literature that I'm reading, I mean, people have died from fasts, but one is really rare, and two is an extraordinary circumstance. In one of the books that I read, a guy fasted for like 7 months. I'm assuming because he was pretty overweight. He was going through like large fat stores in his body, but the doctor told him he was a medically supervised fast. And the doctor's like, hey, you're showing signs of starvation now, even though you still have, you're still overweight, or he still had some weight to him, I think. You're showing signs of starvation. You need to stop the fast. You've already gone longer than I recommended. Yeah, now you have to stop. Well, they persisted anyways, and they died. That being said, the longest fast in history, I think, is over a year. So if someone's fasting for a year plus, I mean, that's a pretty good indicator that fasting for 30 to 40 days is relatively safe, or at least relatively possible, right? That you could endeavor to do it at least and pay attention to what the signals your body's sending you and whatnot, and be okay. The fasts that I've done in the past have all been great. It feels really unpleasant, but I've never had a single serious sign of any harm at all. And I've always felt better during the fast and after the fast for a long period. That being said, a lot of people say that you have to be medically supervised on a fast. When I'm kind of a brash, wild guy in a lot of senses. I don't think this is my own personal thought. Doesn't mean you should do it. I'm not giving you permission to do it on your own, but because the ancients and the people that came before us regularly fasted without supervision, I think that means it's okay to fast without supervision. Being an idiot about it is not a good idea. You have to listen to your body. If you need to break your fast, if something's going wrong and you sense that it's wrong, you got to break your fast, right? You might have to do a few fasts before you feel comfortable enough and you have the presence of mind to safely execute a long fast. I do not think it's a good idea in any way, if you're scared to do a fast, to fast. It's something that requires a lot of calm, a cool consciousness, and an ability to handle problems that is not conducive to stress. So do I experience stress on my fast? Yeah, there's been a few times where I've been like, man, I feel like, maybe this was a bad idea. Maybe something bad's going to happen. Maybe I'm not prepared to do this, right? We all have self-doubt, right? And there's the small level of stress that comes along with it. It's come and gone within 5 to 10 minutes, right? That's acceptable. Being panicked, being extremely afraid to fast before you even start, and then fasting anyways. Everyone has to measure it for themselves, but those aren't good signs, right? You should be excited to fast. You should be very willing to fast, and you should believe that you can do the fast and that it's going to work well for you. And you should not be afraid to stop. You should always be perfectly willing and able to stop at any moment if you think that's the right thing to do. So that being said, there's facilities that do medically supervised fasts. I'm in a quasi-supervised fast. My doctor has done a 30-day fast before. I got a really excellent doctor who is hands-off. We talk about all of our stuff and make decisions together. I hope you can find a doctor that's the same, but he said, I was like, hey, I want you to supervise me on this fast. He's like, well, I don't see any medical problem, any reasons that you can't fast. Even though you got this TMS injury, with your blood work and stuff, like, I don't see any reason you can't do it. Just go for it. If there's anything crops up, we'll deal with it when it crops up. But I don't think you need close supervision. I don't think you need blood work every week and this stuff. And I agreed with him because I was already thinking along those lines, because historically, if people fasted for 40 days without supervision, that's what I want to do. I am not about putting my hope and investing my future in the supervision of others. If you feel that way, that's okay. Under different circumstances, I might be okay with it. But in this stage of my life, like, I want to be self-sufficient. I think that I'm intelligent enough and I can trust myself enough, and my body is intelligent enough to send me signals to know when to stop, when to start, and all that stuff. So that's where I'm sitting at with it. And that leads us into the fast. So I'm planning on fasting for 30 to 40 days. If I need to break the fast at 5 days, it'll be 5. If I need to break it at 20, it'll be 20, right? I'm not interested in going any longer than my body's telling me to go. So I really hope I can make it to 30. It would be a huge success. If I felt great at 30 and I push on to 40, I would be absolutely ecstatic. And then I would stop at 40. I can't even picture myself getting that far right now. I'm 4 days in at the moment, which would be 10% of the way there. it seems like a really long, arduous journey ahead, but I'll save that. I'm going to do a day 4 journal in a minute here, and go from there. But so I'm having this my initial fasting cast to kind of give you some background on it. I'll highlight the books on there. And maybe I'll throw some other links, because there's a tremendous amount of stuff online about it, just to give people an idea to look for themselves and to learn for themselves. But that's it for now. And then based on the fasting podcast, I'll kind of make sub podcasts for each one, and they'll be probably quick daily journals, and I'll try to go over what's important for people to hear about what I'm experiencing each day, so that as you listen, you'll know what's going on in my head and what I'm feeling in my body as I go through the fast. Hopefully it'll encourage you to think about it. And they should be short. Some of them might get longer. I might pontificate a little bit, because the biggest thing with the fast, I think, is boredom. It's when you don't have meals to break up your day, you get bored, and the structure and how you relate to time passing in your day changes. It's a really interesting phenomena. But because of that, I might ramble some days. But it'll all be good stuff. So I hope you listen. Hope you tune in. Have a good one.